$2. That is all Sofia Morgan has left in the world. She sits in the driver's seat of her 2008 Honda Civic, parked in the shadows behind the 24-hour diner on 8th Avenue, and counts the crumpled bills one more time as if the number might change. A 1. Another 1. 2 singles, creased and worn soft from her trembling fingers. The humid August night presses against the windshield like a living thing, and sweat beads at her temples even though the engine is off, even though the air conditioning has not worked in 3 months. On the passenger seat, half buried under fast food napkins and receipts, sits the letter. Cream-colored envelope with her name typed in a font that feels like a weapon. She has read it 17 times since it arrived this morning, but the words do not change no matter how many times her eyes move across them. Final notice. $300,000 owed. 7 days to respond or face federal asset seizure. Harold Brennan's lawyers. The letterhead reads in crisp black text. Harold Brennan. Even thinking his name makes her stomach clench. Sofia leans her forehead against the steering wheel. The plastic is warm from the day's heat. She closes her eyes and tries to remember what it felt like to have hope, but the memory is so old now, so distant, that it might belong to someone else entirely. 27 years old and looking decades older. Dark hair pulled back so tight it gives her a headache, though maybe that is just the debt, just the fear, just the 8 years of running that have worn grooves into her face like water on stone. Her hands shake as she folds the letter and slides it back into the envelope. The scar tissue across her knuckles, old, faded white lines from breaks that healed without medical attention, catches the streetlight bleeding through the windshield. She pulls her hands into her lap and holds them still through sheer force of will. Behind the diner, the kitchen exhales. Grease and salt and the sharp smell of burnt coffee grounds. Sofia has worked the closing shift here for 4 months, washing dishes in the back, eating the mistakes, the eggs cooked too long, the toast left too dark, and keeping her head down. The manager, a tired man named Robert who has stopped asking questions about her living situation, pays her in cash. $200 a week. Enough for gas and soap and the phone bill she keeps active even though no one calls. But $200 a week is not enough for $300,000 in 7 days. The diner's back door swings open, and Marco steps out into the humid night. She sees him only because she is watching, because she is always watching, always measuring the distance between herself and danger. He is broad-shouldered, mid-40s, with a scar that cuts from his left eye down to his jaw like a knife wound that never fully healed. His suit costs more than everything Sofia owns. The fabric catches the light as he walks toward the parking lot, toward the black Cadillac parked near the dumpster, and she sinks lower in her seat though she knows he will not see her. He never looks at people like her. Sofia waits until his headlights disappear down 8th Avenue before she opens her car door and steps out into the suffocating night. 3 blocks away, in a darkened office above the diner, Vincent Conti sits before a wall of security monitors and watches the world unfold in black and white. The screens glow with images from every angle: the kitchen, the counter, the main dining room, the back booths. Vincent is 49 years old and carries the weight of 15 years in the city like a coat made of stone. His dark suit is Italian silk worth more than a first month's rent. A thin scar runs from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, a gift from a man who made the mistake of thinking Vincent was less dangerous than he actually was. His hands are steady, his face illuminated by the monitor's blue-white light, and his eyes, dark gray like storm clouds, miss nothing. He watches Marco leave. Watches the cook slide a plate of eggs into the warming window. Watches Robert the manager count the register with the kind of quiet desperation Vincent recognizes because he has seen it 1,000 times before in this city. Then he sees her. Sofia Morgan walks through the diner's front doors at 3:22 in the morning. She is thin, almost skeletal, with dark eyes that have learned to make themselves small. Her waitress uniform is from a previous job, slightly too loose, and her shoes are held together with athletic tape wrapped around the sole. She moves like someone who has learned to take up as little space as possible, like a person accustomed to being invisible. Vincent does not look away from the screen. She walks to booth 7, takes an order from a construction worker who barely glances at her. She nods once, her voice too quiet for the microphone to catch, and turns toward the kitchen. This is the third night she has worked a double shift. Vincent knows because he watches everything in his domain, and this small woman with the haunted eyes has moved into his domain without asking permission. He should not care. He has 14 other diner locations, 3 nightclubs, a hotel that costs $15 million, and a network of businesses that stretch across the city like veins carrying blood. He is not the kind of man who notices individual waitresses. He is the kind of man who notices threats, money flow, and weakness in his operations. Individual people are irrelevant. And yet, at 3:15 in the morning, Vincent watches 2 men enter the diner. Marco and Sal, a younger enforcer, early 30s, with the kind of cold eyes that come from having done things that cannot be undone. They do not sit at the counter. They do not order food. Instead, they walk to the back booths where a teenager, maybe 17, maybe younger, face pale with terror, sits alone with a cold cup of coffee and a backpack at his feet. Vincent leans forward. His fingers pause over the keyboard. Marco leans down and speaks words Vincent cannot hear. The teenager's hands begin to shake. Sal pulls a chair backward and straddles it, his jacket falling open just enough to show the gun holstered beneath his left arm. The message is clear. This is not a conversation. This is a threat. Vincent's jaw tightens. He does not remember sending Marco and Sal to collect from teenagers who work at the diner. This is outside protocol. This is sloppy, which means either Marco has gone rogue or someone above Marco has ordered something Vincent does not know about. Neither option is acceptable. He reaches for the phone. But then Sofia Morgan walks out of the kitchen. She is carrying a tray of plates, greasy and hot, and she sees the scene unfolding in the back booth. She sees Marco's hand move toward his waistband. She sees Sal's predatory posture. She sees the boy shaking like a branch in a storm. For one full second, she does not move. Then she sets the tray down on the nearest empty table, the coffee spills, the eggs slide, and she walks toward them. Vincent's hand freezes over the keyboard. Sofia plants herself between Marco and the boy. She is 5'4". Marco is 6'2". The disparity in physical power is so absolute that it should be comical. Instead, Vincent finds himself leaning even closer to the screen. He watches her speak. Her mouth moves. Her shoulders are tense enough to snap. But her feet do not move, and her eyes do not drop. She is terrified. Vincent can read that in the way her hands curl into fists at her sides, but she does not break. Marco's hand falls away from his waistband. Sal straightens in his chair. The boy makes a small sound, something between a sob and a prayer. Sofia says something else. Her voice must be steady because neither man moves to threaten her further. Instead, they exchange a look, confusion, maybe anger, definitely surprise, and then they stand and walk toward the exit without another word. The tension in the diner shatters like dropped glass. Vincent sits back in his chair and exhales. He rewinds the footage on screen 3, watching the scene again in reverse. Sofia walking backward. The men straightening. Her planting her feet. The moment where she decides to move. In 15 years running this city, Vincent has seen men twice her size break under Marco's stare. He has seen soldiers, made men, people with families and everything to lose, crumble into begging when Marco walks into a room. But this woman, homeless, invisible, nobody, stands between a dangerous man and a child and does not flinch. Vincent zooms in on her face. There is terror in her eyes, yes. But there is something else. Something that looks like purpose. Like the kind of strength that does not come from money or power or the threat of violence. The kind of strength that comes from having already lost everything and deciding to stand anyway. Who is she? Vincent whispers to the empty office. The monitors do not answer. Sofia walks back to the kitchen, her shoulders shaking slightly, and Vincent Conti sits in the darkness and feels something shift in his chest, something that has been locked away for 19 years, ever since Ava's nursery went quiet and the world stopped making sense. But what Sofia Morgan did not know, as she steadied her trembling hands at the sink and tried to stop her heart from exploding out of her rib cage, was that the man watching her from above controlled every block in Miami for 20 miles in every direction. She did not know that his name was Vincent Conti, or that he had just decided something while watching her stand between danger and innocence. She did not know that her act of courage would put her on a collision course with both salvation and destruction. She only knew that the boy was safe. She only knew that her hands would not stop shaking for hours. And she did not know that everything, absolutely everything, was about to change. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. The story of Sofia Morgan and Vincent Conti is far from over. In fact, it is just beginning. Now let us go back. Back to the humid August night when Sofia Morgan had nowhere left to run, no one left to turn to, and only $2 standing between her and the edge of a cliff. Let us understand how a woman with nothing became someone worth fighting for. $2. That was everything Sofia Morgan had left in the world, and the letter in her trembling hands demanded $300,000 in 7 days. The number swam in front of her eyes as she sat in the darkness of her 2004 Honda Civic, parked in the lot behind the diner on 8th Avenue. The humid August night pressed against the windows like something alive, making the air inside thick enough to taste sweat and fear and the metallic tang of desperation. The dome light cast everything in sickly yellow as she held the envelope at arm's length, as if distance could somehow change what the word said. Final notice. The stamp was red, aggressive, absolute. Sofia's fingers shook so badly she could barely grip the paper. $300,000. 7 days. Or the state of Florida would issue an arrest warrant for fraud, forgery, and theft of services. Her name was listed. Her social security number. The amount owed to Evelyn Blackwell, Esquire, and associated parties. She had never stolen anything in her life. The letter crumpled in her fist, and she pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, breathing in the smell of old upholstery and her own fear. Outside, the parking lot was empty except for 2 other cars, a rusted pickup truck and a Cadillac that had probably been abandoned for months. The diner's back entrance stood dark, the kitchen lights off at this hour. In 4 hours, the morning crew would arrive. In 4 hours and 15 minutes, the first cook would flip the switches and the ovens would roar to life. Sofia would not be there. She had nowhere to be anymore. The backpack wedged between the front seats held everything she owned, 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and now, 2 single-dollar bills folded together in the front pocket. She had been sleeping in this car for 3 weeks. Before that, it had been a hostel in Wynwood, before that a motel where the manager let her work off the room charge by cleaning bathrooms. Before that, a shelter. Before that, a bench in Lummus Park when the shelter was full. But it had all been manageable, barely manageable, until the letter arrived. The scar across Sofia's lower back throbbed with the tension in her muscles, a phantom ache from old violence. She lifted her shirt without thinking and pressed her hand against the thin fabric of her bra, feeling the raised lines of scar tissue beneath. 8 years of Harold Brennan's fists. 8 years of learning how to make herself small, how to apologize for things that were not her fault, how to take the blame for his rage. 8 years of being told she was worthless, defective, a mistake that should have been erased before she was even born. And then, 6 months ago, she had run. She had taken the Greyhound bus from Atlanta with $300 saved in a coffee tin, and she had gotten as far as Miami before the money ran out. She had thought she was safe. She had thought that 300 miles and a new city and a job washing dishes at a 24-hour diner meant that Harold Brennan was finally in her past. But he had reached across those 300 miles anyway. Through lawyers. Through wealth. Through the kind of connections that made the police return her calls and judges smile when she walked into courtrooms. Through Evelyn Blackwell. The memory of that woman's face made Sofia's stomach turn. Evelyn had been Harold's business partner for 15 years, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a sharper smile, who wore tailored suits that cost more than Sofia's annual rent and carried a leather portfolio like it was a weapon. Sofia had never understood their relationship. Not romantic, not exactly friendship. Something older, something built on shared cruelty and shared profit. 6 months ago, just before Sofia fled, Evelyn had come to the apartment in Atlanta. Harold had forced Sofia to sit at the kitchen table while they discussed finances. Sofia's hands had been wrapped in bandages from a burn, an accident, Harold had called it, though his fist had been the cause. Evelyn had barely looked at her. She signed the business loan papers, Evelyn had said to Harold, as if Sofia were not sitting there. Whatever happens to you, legally she's responsible for the debt. I never, Sofia had started, but Harold had grabbed her wrist and squeezed until she stopped speaking. She understands her obligations, he had said. She had not understood. She had been terrified, bleeding, barely conscious of what she was signing. But the lawyers had found the signature, her signature, though she did not remember the moment it happened, and that was all the evidence they needed. $300,000. 7 days. Or prison. Sofia pressed her palms against her eyes until she saw stars exploding in the darkness. The letter fell onto the passenger seat. Through the windshield, she could see the diner, its back entranced like a mouth open to swallow her. She had 5 hours before she was scheduled to clock in. 5 hours to figure out how to not go back. 5 hours to figure out how to move forward when there was nowhere left to move to. Her phone buzzed on the dashboard. A text from her manager at the diner. Need you tonight. Marco and Sal coming in. Important meeting in the back booth. Keep the place clear. 2 a.m. onward. Sofia's breath caught. Marco and Sal. Those names meant something. She had heard them whispered by the other waitresses, spoken with the kind of fear that comes from knowing you are standing near power and hoping it does not notice you. Something to do with the man who owned the building. Something to do with the real business conducted in the back booth at 3 in the morning when normal people were sleeping. She had learned not to ask questions. She had learned to keep her head down, take her tips, and pretend she could not hear raised voices behind the kitchen door. But tonight, with a red-stamped letter in her hand and $2 to her name and 7 days before the arrest warrant, tonight felt different. Tonight felt like the last night anything would matter. Sofia started the car. The engine turned over with a grinding sound like something in pain. She pulled out of the parking lot and drove 3 blocks to the gas station, her hand steady on the wheel even though her heart was coming apart inside her chest. The bathroom was empty, thank God. She locked the door and stood at the sink, running water as hot as she could stand. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, harsh and relentless, turning her skin the color of a corpse. She did not look at her face. Instead, she lifted her shirt and turned, studying the map of scars across her back and shoulders. One scar ran from her left shoulder blade to her hip, the one from when Harold had thrown her against the kitchen cabinet. Another formed a jagged line across her ribs, from a belt buckle she had never identified, just remembered the impact. Smaller marks scattered everywhere, each one a moment she had survived. Overlapping lines like a geological record of pain. She had never spoken about them to anyone. Not to a doctor. Not to a friend. Not to the shelter counselor who had asked gentle questions and Sofia had answered with polite lies. No one knew. No one was allowed to know. The door rattled violently. Someone trying the handle. Occupied, Sofia called out, her voice steady despite the way her hands shook. She pulled her shirt down and turned off the water, watching the droplets fall from her fingertips. 3 minutes later, she was back in the car. The walk to the diner took 15 minutes. The streets were mostly empty at this hour, 2:50 in the morning, when the city belonged to insomniacs and shift workers and people like Sofia who had nowhere else to be. The air was thick with humidity, the kind of night that made breathing feel like drowning. Distant thunder rumbled on the horizon, and the palms that lined 8th Avenue rustled restlessly, like they were waiting for something terrible to begin. The diner's neon sign flickered, open 24 hours, pulsing like a heartbeat. She pushed through the glass door, and the air conditioning hit her like a wall. Diane, the closing waitress, glanced up from wiping down the counter. She was a woman in her 60s with grey hair dyed an unconvincing red and lines around her eyes that came from years of not asking questions about the people who came and went. "You're early," Diane said. "Couldn't sleep," Sofia answered, which was true. She had not slept properly in weeks. The diner was nearly empty. A man in a trucker cap sat in a corner booth with cold coffee in front of him, staring at nothing. An older couple held hands across a formica table, their food untouched. The black and white checkered floor gleamed under fluorescent lights. The smell of stale coffee and grease hung in the air like a permanent resident, thick enough to coat her throat. Sofia slid into a booth by the window and gestured to Diane. "Coffee," she said. "Black." Diane poured without comment and left the check on the table. $1.50. Sofia pulled out her wallet, a thin piece of leather that had belonged to her mother, the only beautiful thing she owned, and counted out the cash. $1 bill and 4 quarters. That left her with 50 cents. 50 cents to last until her paycheck on Friday, which was 5 days away, which was before the 7-day deadline, which meant she would die before she had to worry about the arrest warrant. The thought came to her without emotion, as if it belonged to someone else's life. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug and stared out at the empty street. But what Sofia did not know, as she sat in that booth with her $2 gradually becoming $1.50, was that Harold Brennan had made a phone call from Atlanta just after midnight. The phone had rung 4 times before his contact answered. "She's in Miami," Harold had said. "Working at the diner on 8th, near the financial district. She's running, which means she's about to disappear again." The detective on the other end of the line, a man named Curtis who had been on Harold's payroll for 3 years, had written down the address. "I'll pick her up," Curtis had promised. "Not yet," Harold had said. "Let her sweat first. Let her understand there's no escape. Then arrest her. I want her to sit in a cell and think about what happens when you betray me." The call had ended. Curtis had hung up the phone and made a note in his calendar, Friday morning. 6 a.m. 8th Avenue. And at that exact moment, in a darkened office 2 stories above the diner, Vincent Conti had been watching Sofia Morgan on the security camera feed, studying the tilt of her head, the way her hand shook around the coffee mug, the absolute stillness of her body, like someone already gone, like someone waiting for permission to stop breathing. And Vincent Conti was still watching when the next event unfolded. The door to the diner opened with a sharp bell chime. 2 men entered. The door to the diner opened with a sharp bell chime at 3:22 in the morning, and 2 men entered like sharks moving through dark water. Marco and Sal. Both wore suits that cost more than Sofia Morgan had earned in the last 6 months. Marco was broad-shouldered, neck tattoos visible above his collar like a map of violence. Sal was taller, meaner, his voice a low growl that made the fluorescent light seem to flicker. They moved toward the back booth where a teenager sat alone, maybe 16, skinny, terrified, his body folded into the corner like he was trying to disappear into the vinyl seat. Sofia watched from her booth near the front window, the black coffee cooling between her hands. She should not get involved. She knew this. She knew it the way someone knows the difference between living and dying, as absolute fact. She had $2 in her pocket. 50 cents now, technically, because she had already paid for the coffee. Every single dollar was a calculation, a choice between eating tomorrow and eating today. Getting involved meant trouble. Trouble meant police. Police meant arrest warrants catching up with her, which meant jail, which meant her 50 cents would become nothing and her car would be impounded and Harold Brennan would find her. But the boy's face. It was the same face she had worn for 8 years. "You owe Mr. Conti $8,000, Marco said, his voice filling the empty diner like a curse. "Where is it?" The boy stammered. "I don't have it. My dad was supposed to." "Your dad's in county," Marco interrupted. "That makes it your problem now." Sal leaned in, blocking the boy's only escape route. His hand moved toward his waistband, and Sofia's entire body went cold because she had seen that movement before, seen what came after it, felt the weight of consequence settle onto skin like a blade. 3 seconds passed. Then 4. Diane was behind the counter, suddenly very focused on wiping cups that were already clean. The 2 truckers in the corner had found their phones absolutely fascinating. No one was going to help this boy. No one ever did. Sofia stood. Her legs moved before her mind caught up, and she walked toward the back booth, her waitress uniform swishing softly against her thighs. The sound of her footsteps on the checkered floor seemed impossibly loud, as if the diner itself was holding its breath. She planted herself between Marco and the boy, her body a shield that weighed nothing, that meant nothing, that was about to ruin everything she had worked for. "Leave him alone," Sofia said. Her voice was steady. That was the shocking part. The heart hammering against her ribs, the terror cascading through her nervous system, the absolute knowledge that she was about to be hurt, none of it made it into her voice. She sounded like someone who was not afraid. She sounded like someone who had decided not to break. Sal laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You got to be kidding me." Marco stepped closer. His shadow fell across her face. "Lady, you don't know who you're talking to." "I know you're 2 grown men threatening a kid," Sofia said. "Walk away." The diner went silent. Complete, absolute silence, the kind that happens right before something shatters. Even the truckers looked up now, their phones forgotten, their eyes wide with the understanding that something was about to go catastrophically wrong. Marco and Sal exchanged a glance, a silent conversation between 2 men who had worked together for 5 years, who had hurt people together, who had never encountered anyone foolish enough to stand against them. Something in Sofia's eyes stopped them. Not kindness. Not anger. Just the absolute lack of self-preservation. The way she met Marco's stare directly, the way she did not flinch when his hand twitched, the way her entire body said, "I am willing to pay whatever price this costs." They paused. In the darkened office 2 stories above the diner, Vincent Conti sat forward in his leather chair, the security monitor casting blue light across his face. He had been watching the cameras for hours, the way he did most nights. The city was safer when he was paying attention, or that was what he told himself. What he was really doing was filling time. What he was really doing was running from the nursery on the 41st floor of his penthouse that had stayed exactly the way it was 19 years ago, down to the mobile of glass angels that turned slowly in the air conditioning. He saw Sofia's face in close-up now. He saw the terror she was hiding behind her steady voice. He saw the way her collar had shifted, revealing the edge of scarring that ran across her shoulder blade like a topographical map of someone else's violence. And he saw the moment she chose not to break, the moment her spine straightened and her jaw tightened and she became something more than just a waitress with $2 in her pocket. Vincent's chest tightened. It was an unfamiliar sensation. It was pain. He had not felt pain like this since the day the doctors had told him that Ava was gone, that his daughter had been stillborn, that the nursery would remain empty forever. Marco. Sal. Office. "Now," Vincent said into the intercom. His voice came out flat, controlled, but something in it made both men freeze. They exchanged one more look, uncertain now, confused by the interruption. Then they stepped back from Sofia, away from the boy, toward the stairs that led up to Vincent's office. Sofia exhaled. The tension in her shoulders collapsed like a building imploding, everything falling inward at once. She turned to the boy, her voice gentle now. "Go home. Different route than you came." The boy nodded, scrambling out of the booth, running toward the door. The bell chimed. He was gone. Sofia sat back down at her booth. Her hands shook so hard she could barely lift the coffee mug. The liquid sloshed slightly, a small earthquake contained in ceramic. What she did not know was that Vincent Conti, in his office above, was rewinding the security footage. He watched Sofia stand between his men and the boy again. He watched her voice stay steady. He watched the way the fear did not break her, the way the terror did not shatter her spine. He rewound it again. 7 more times, he watched her choose not to break. And each time, the hollow place in his chest hurt a little less. At 3:45 in the morning, Vincent descended the stairs from his office. He moved slowly, deliberately, each step a decision. His suit was tailored to his broad shoulders, his dark hair graying at the temples, his eyes the color of a storm that had nowhere left to go. There was a scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone, thin and precise, the kind of scar that came from someone who knew exactly where to cut to cause maximum damage without killing. He slid into the seat across from Sofia without asking permission. She looked up, startled, her entire body tensing. She had seen him before. Everyone in Miami had seen Vincent Conti, or at least heard stories about him, whispered warnings in dark corners about what happened to people who owed him money or betrayed his trust or simply looked at him the wrong way. "You just stood between my enforcers and a debt," Vincent said quietly. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "Either you're very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Sofia said. Her voice was tired. Exhausted. The kind of tired that comes from 8 years of running, 8 years of looking over your shoulder, 8 years of sleeping in a Honda Civic and washing up in gas station bathrooms. "Are you going to hurt me?" "No." Vincent studied her face the way a general surveys a battlefield, taking in every detail, every weakness, every point of strength. "Why did you do it?" "Because nobody else would." The answer was simple. Honest. True in a way that made something in his chest constrict. Vincent signaled Diane with one raised hand. "Bring her food. Whatever she wants." Sofia started to protest. "I can't pay for." "I didn't ask if you could pay." Diane brought eggs, toast, hash browns, a glass of orange juice. Sofia stared at the plate like it might disappear, like it might be a trick, like the moment she touched it something would snatch it away. She ate slowly, methodically, the way someone does when they do not know where the next meal is coming from. Vincent watched her eat. He did not look away. He did not speak. He just watched, and in that watching, there was something almost gentle. When she finished, he asked, "What's your name?" "Sofia Morgan." "Where do you live, Sofia?" She hesitated. "Around." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Vincent leaned back. In the kitchen, behind the order window, Marco and Sal were staring at the scene unfolding in the booth. Their boss never sat down with customers. Their boss never offered food to strangers. Their boss did not ask questions with that tone of voice, soft, almost tender, like he was trying not to frighten something fragile. "In 15 years, I've never seen him like this," Marco whispered. Sal shook his head slowly. "Who is she?" But Vincent was already speaking again. "You're in trouble. Real trouble. I can see it in the way you hold your cup, the way you eat, the way you're calculating the distance to the door in case you need to run." Sofia's walls went up so fast it was almost visible, like a shutter slamming closed. "Why would you help me? You don't know me. I'm nobody." "Maybe that's exactly why." The door chimed. A woman entered, and the temperature of the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. She was maybe 50, dressed in designer clothes that cost more than Sofia's car, a pearl necklace that caught the fluorescent light. Her eye swept across the diner and landed on Sofia like a blade finding flesh. "Evelyn Blackwell." Sofia felt the blood drain from her face. "There you are," Evelyn said, voice dripping false sweetness. "I've been looking everywhere for you, dear." Vincent noticed the change in Sofia immediately. The way her hands stopped shaking because they had gone completely numb. The way she stopped breathing. "Friend of yours?" he asked. "Hardly," Evelyn said. She pulled out a chair and sat at their booth uninvited, her designer bag settling onto the table like it owned the space. "Sofia owes me $300,000. She signed a promissory note for her ex-boyfriend's business venture. When it failed, the debt became hers. The courts have already ruled in my favor." "That's not true," Sofia said quietly. Her voice sounded far away, hollow. I never signed anything. Harold? Harold's not relevant anymore, Evelyn interrupted. 7 days, Sofia. Then I filed charges for fraud and forgery. And with your current employment status and housing situation, I doubt any judge will be sympathetic. She smiled. It was a smile without warmth. Enjoy your breakfast. She stood, smoothed her dress, and walked out. The bell chimed. The diner felt colder. Sofia's hand started shaking again. This time they did not stop. $300,000, she whispered. I have 50 cents. No, less than that. I'm sleeping in my car. I wash up in gas station bathrooms. I have nothing. Her voice broke on the last word. Vincent's jaw tightened. Something shifted in his face, the enforcer, the boss, the part of him that had built an empire through fear and violence and absolute control, all of it rising to the surface. But his voice stayed gentle. Tell me about the scars. Sofia froze. Every muscle in her body went rigid. I saw them, Vincent said. On the camera. Your collar shifted when you stood. I don't talk about them. Maybe you should. The silence stretched. It became its own living thing, its own presence in the booth. Sofia stared at her empty plate. She stared at the cold coffee. And then she started to speak, and the words came out like poison from a wound that had never fully healed. 8 years with Harold Brennan. The first time he hit her, she had burned his dinner, an accident, a moment of inattention. The 100th time, she had lost count somewhere around year 4. The scars on her back running in every direction like a map of hell, like a topographical guide to every rage, every moment she had flinched or cried or tried to leave. The way Harold knew cops. The way her reports disappeared. The way he always found her, no matter how far she ran or how carefully she hid. He's still looking for me, Sofia finished. Her voice was barely a whisper. Him and Evelyn. They want me arrested or dead. I don't know which is worse. Vincent's hands were fists on the table. The scar on his face seemed to darken, as if all the anger he contained was rising to the surface, pressing against his skin from the inside. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. Where is he now? I don't know. Somewhere in Miami. Could be anywhere. He's good at disappearing. I'll find him. Why? Sofia asked again, and this time her voice was desperate. Why would you do this? You don't know me. I've got nothing to offer you. Nothing at all. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. The clock on the diner wall ticked forward. 3:58 became 3:59. Outside, the Miami night pressed against the windows, humid and dark. Because 19 years ago, I lost my daughter, Vincent said quietly. Her name was Ava. She was stillborn. And I've spent 19 years with a nursery I can't dismantle and a name I can't say out loud. I've spent 19 years hollow. Empty. Like someone had carved everything out of my chest and left nothing behind. Sofia's eyes filled with tears. And then I watched you on those cameras, standing between my men and that boy, Vincent continued. Standing there with nothing but courage and a $2 cup of coffee. And for the first time since Ava, I felt something other than empty. For the first time in 19 years, I felt like maybe there was still a reason to fight. I can't pay you back, Sofia said. I don't want payment. I want you safe. But what neither of them knew was that Harold Brennan had just received a phone call in a cheap hotel room across the city. The call had come from Evelyn Blackwell herself. She's at the diner on 8th, Evelyn had said. The one near the financial district. She's still in Miami. Still running. Harold had hung up the phone and started packing. And he was coming. The rain came down in sheets, hammering against the apartment windows like it was trying to break through. Sofia sat on the edge of the bed at 4 a.m, her wet clothes clinging to her skin, her phone still in her trembling hand. Harold's voice echoed in her mind. Not a memory. Fresh. Present. Real. "I know where you are," he had said. The apartment suddenly felt like a trap instead of a refuge. These locks were better than the ones at the last place, but locks had never stopped Harold before. He had always found a way through. She looked at her backpack in the corner, old friend, constant companion, already knowing she could have it packed in 90 seconds. She had done it 100 times. Sleep in the Civic. Keep moving. Disappear again into the night like she was nothing, like she had never existed at all. But the thought of it, the endless running, the way her bones felt like they might shatter if she had to move one more time, made something inside her want to give up completely. Thunder cracked across the sky. She stood and walked to the balcony, pulled the sliding door open, and stepped into the downpour. The rain soaked through immediately, cold and brutal, washing over the 8 years of scars on her back. 8 years of his fists. 8 years of being afraid. 8 years of believing that she was less than human, that the debt was real, that she deserved the breaking and the bleeding and the endless terror. Her hands gripped the metal railing so hard her knuckles turned white. The street below was empty. Wet. A ribbon of darkness lit only by the occasional passing car, headlights cutting through the storm like searching eyes. How many times had she thought about this? About the way one moment of letting go could end all of it. The fear. The running. The weight of being invisible to everyone except the people who wanted to hurt her. One step, a voice whispered inside her head. That's all it takes. One step and it's over. She closed her eyes. The rain pounded down, and she stood there at the edge of her own life, thinking about what it would be like to stop fighting. To stop running. To be nothing at last, completely and finally, with no one left to hunt her. Then she heard it. A sound from the apartment next door, cutting through the storm like a blade through water. A child's laugh. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, giggling at something on television or in a dream or just at the simple fact of being alive at 4 in the morning when the rain was falling. Sofia's eyes snapped open. The sound pulled her back. Back to the diner, to the terrified boy in the booth, to the way his hands had shaken when Vincent told him to run. Back to Vincent's hollow eyes when he spoke about Ava, about a nursery that still waited in a penthouse, about 19 years of carrying a name he could not say aloud. She stepped back from the railing. Walked inside. The apartment was warm and dry and safe. She went to her phone and called Vincent. It was 4:17 in the morning, but he answered on the second ring. "He found me," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Harold. He called. He knows where I am." On the other end of the line, Vincent Conti went very still. She could hear him breathing, could feel the shift in the air between them, the moment when something cold and lethal stirred in his chest. "Good," he said, and his voice was not the voice of the man who had held her hand at the diner. This was the voice of the Mafia boss, deep and solid like an oath carved in stone. "Now I know exactly where he'll be." What Sofia did not see was Vincent in his penthouse, phone in one hand, already moving toward his office. What she did not see was him texting Marco with commands. What she did not know was that 12 men in black tactical gear were gathering in a garage 2 blocks away, checking weapons, running through the operation one final time. Harold Brennan's location was already on their screens. At 5:47 in the morning, the FBI breached the house in Coral Gables that Evelyn Blackwell owned. Vincent had made one call to a federal prosecutor who owed him a favor, had provided evidence so thorough, so devastating, that the government had no choice but to move. Aggravated assault. Extortion. Fraud. Conspiracy to defraud. The agents moved in synchronized silence through the darkened house. Harold was in bed when they came through the bedroom door, the noise of the breach jolting him awake. His hand went automatically to the nightstand, reaching for the gun he kept there. "Hands! Hands! Hands!" the agent screamed, weapons raised, tactical vests bearing the letters FBI in white across their chests. Harold froze. His hand stopped inches from the drawer. For a moment, he was a predator facing a threat he could not overcome. Then he crumpled, hands up, shaking like a man who had finally understood that his time had ended. I didn't, she made me, it was Evelyn's idea, I was just following orders. He was on his knees now, begging, tears running down his face, the man who had terrorized Sofia for 8 years reduced to something pitiful and small. His strength meant nothing against this. His rage had no power here. Harold Brennan, you are under arrest for aggravated assault, extortion, fraud, and conspiracy to defraud, the lead agent said, her voice without emotion or mercy. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The handcuffs clicked into place with a sound like a lock closing. News cameras were already outside, having been tipped off by Vincent's connections in the media. Reporters stood in the rain, cameras rolling, capturing Harold Brennan being led out of the house in cuffs, his face streaked with tears and rage, his expensive shirt torn, the facade of power shattered completely. Meanwhile, across the city, Evelyn Blackwell sat at her mahogany desk in her corner office, reviewing quarterly reports. She was wearing a Chanel suit that cost more than Sofia had earned in her entire life. Her nails were perfectly manicured. Her makeup was flawless. She was in the middle of explaining quarterly projections to her team when the doors opened. FBI agents entered. 12 of them. All of them with the same cold, professional demeanor. Evelyn stood, reaching for her phone. This is absurd. Do you know who I am? I have lawyers. I have judges. I have? Evelyn Blackwell, the lead agent interrupted, you are under arrest for fraud, extortion, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You can't do this, Evelyn said, but her voice had changed. The confidence had cracked. I have connections. I have people. You don't understand what you're doing. We understand completely, the agent replied. We have 18 months of falsified documents. Forged signatures. Witness testimony from every victim you threatened. We have deposit records showing money transfers totaling $320,000 extorted through threats and intimidation. We have recorded phone calls where you ordered men to find Sofia Morgan and bring her back. Evelyn's face went white. The handcuffs went on, and her composure shattered like glass dropped from a height. She screamed as the agents led her out of her office, past her horrified clients and assistants, past the windows where the Miami sun was rising over the bay. Photographers captured everything, her perfect suit torn, her makeup running, her screaming fury at cameras, the moment a woman who had believed herself untouchable learned that she was not. By noon, every news channel in Miami was running the footage. Harold Brennan, led from the house in handcuffs, begging, his face a portrait of broken desperation. Evelyn Blackwell, screaming obscenities as agents loaded her into a federal van, her career and reputation disintegrating in real time. The federal prosecutor held a press conference at 2 in the afternoon. Harold Brennan will face 40 years in federal prison, she announced, her voice clear and cutting. Evelyn Blackwell will face 35 years. No parole. No plea deals. This case sends a message: if you prey on the vulnerable, if you use your power to threaten and intimidate and extort, this office will dismantle your entire existence. Not through violence. Through law. Through accountability. Through the systematic dismantling of everything you built. The cameras flashed. By evening, the story had spread across social media like fire. Within 6 hours, 2 million people had watched the footage. By the end of the week, every news outlet in the country had run the story. The narrative took shape in the national consciousness, a powerful woman and her enforcer, brought down by their own cruelty, their own greed, their own belief that money and connections could shield them from consequence. In her small apartment, Sofia watched it happen. She sat on her bed with her phone in her hands, watching Harold Brennan's face twisted in desperation, watching Evelyn Blackwell's perfect facade crumble, and she felt something shift inside her chest. Not joy, exactly. Not yet. But something like possibility. Something like the beginning of being able to breathe. The weight did not lift all at once. 8 years of terror does not disappear in a day. But Harold Brennan was 40 years away from her now, locked behind federal prison walls. Evelyn Blackwell was somewhere in detention, awaiting trial, stripped of everything: her business, her standing, her reputation, the social armor she had worn like a second skin. Sofia picked up her phone and called Vincent. "Thank you," she said. His voice came through the line, warm and solid. "You did that. You called. You did not let the fear win." But they both knew it was more complicated than that. And as the rain continued to fall outside her window, Sofia Morgan, who had once counted pennies and slept in a Honda Civic, who had once believed she was nobody, began to understand that the breaking had finally ended. The real building was about to begin. 1 year later, Sofia Morgan stands on a penthouse balcony overlooking Miami, the city lights spreading beneath her like scattered diamonds. The night air carries the salt smell of the ocean 3 blocks away. She wears a simple black dress, her hair longer now, healthier, catching the wind like it belongs there. The scars on her back remain, 8 years of Harold Brennan's rage etched into her skin, but they no longer define her. They have become proof. Evidence that she survived. Below her, the shelter stands illuminated against the darkness. 5 blocks from the diner on 8th Avenue. The building where it all started. 17 people work there now. 63 women have passed through those doors in 12 months, and 63 women have walked out again with something Sofia once thought impossible: a future. The $300,000 debt has been erased. When Evelyn Blackwell's assets were seized and liquidated by federal order, the fraudulent promissory note disappeared from existence like smoke. The courts declared it a forgery. Sofia's name was cleared. Harold Brennan sent one letter from his cell in federal prison, 2,000 miles away. Sofia burned it without reading. The Honda Civic is gone now, sold to a woman named Rebecca who needed a car more than Sofia needed a reminder of desperation. But Sofia kept the backpack. The one that held everything she owned when Vincent first saw her on those security cameras. It sits in her closet still, wedged between her work clothes and the dress she wore the first time she felt beautiful. A talisman. A warning. A map of how far she has traveled. Vincent appears in the balcony doorway, silhouetted against the soft glow from inside. He moves differently now than he did a year ago. The hollow look has drained from his eyes, replaced by something warmer, something that looks like possibility. He has spent the last 12 months building something legitimate, the Vincent Conti Foundation for Abuse Recovery, funded with money that came from legitimate sources now. His empire is transitioning. Slowly. Carefully. The kinds of transitions that take time and cost enormous sums and require lawyers in expensive suits to make official. He steps beside her without speaking. The silence between them is comfortable in a way that silence rarely becomes, earned rather than awkward. "You okay?" he asks. His voice carries the weight of a question that means something deeper. Sofia nods. "Just thinking." "About what?" She pauses, watching the lights flicker and shift. "A year ago, I had $2 in my pocket. And a debt I could never pay. And now," she gestures at the city, at the shelter, at the balcony they stand on together. "Now I have this. It doesn't feel real sometimes." Vincent's jaw tightens. "It's real." He grips the railing, and Sofia can see the muscles in his forearms flex. For months, they have worked side by side at the shelter, helping women rebuild their lives. Slowly, carefully, without pressure, a bond has formed between them. The kind of bond that grows not from passion but from shared purpose. From watching each other be brave. "I need to tell you something," Vincent says. His voice drops lower. "Something I should have said the night you stood on that balcony in the rain." Sofia turns to face him. "That night in the diner," he continues, "when I watched you on the security cameras standing between Marco and Sal and that boy. When I saw you refuse to break, when I watched your voice stay steady even though danger was radiating from both men like heat from a furnace, something inside me woke up." His hands grip the railing so hard his knuckles turn white. Something that had been dead since the morning Ava's crib was empty. His daughter's name hangs in the air between them like a held breath. I thought I was saving you, Vincent says. I believed that was the reason. But the truth is, Sofia, saving you saved me first. You reminded me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing back up. You have been standing back up your entire life, getting knocked down and rising anyway, and I was just hollow. Just existing. Just a man moving through the world without feeling anything. You made me feel again. You made me want to build something real instead of something dark. Sofia's eyes fill with tears. The kind of tears that come not from sadness but from the weight of being truly seen. Of being chosen. Vincent. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. But Sofia steps closer and takes his hand. His grip tightens immediately, like he has been waiting for her to do this. When I was on that balcony in the rain, she says, her voice barely a whisper, ready to give up, ready to believe I couldn't do this anymore, I heard a little girl laughing from inside the penthouse. And I thought about Ava. About how she never got a chance. And I realized I couldn't waste mine. I couldn't let Harold Brennan steal that from me. That's when I understood I had to call. I had to stand up. She squeezes his hand. You gave me that chance. When I was invisible, you saw me. When everyone else had written me off, you believed I was worth saving. And I'm standing here now because you did. They stand together in the silence, two people broken and rebuilt, choosing to face the future not as separate survivors but as a single unit. The city breathes around them, millions of lives happening in the darkness below. Millions of people fighting their own wars. Millions of people trying to stand up just one more time. 6 months later, Sofia sits in her office at the shelter. The walls are painted a soft blue color, colors for sad days, as a child once told her. A young woman sits across from her, 22 years old, covered in bruises that are still learning how to fade. Everything she owns is in a trash bag at her feet. She wears the expression of someone who has been knocked down so many times she has forgotten what standing feels like. I can't do this, the woman whispers. Her hands shake against her thighs. I'm not strong enough. Sofia leans forward and takes both her hands. Her grip is gentle but certain. You're here. That's strength. You left? That's courage. Everything else, we will figure out together. The woman looks up, and Sofia can see her own story reflected back in those eyes. The fear. The exhaustion. The desperate hope that maybe, somehow, things could be different. You really think I can? The woman asks. I know you can. 2 years ago, I was sleeping in my car with $2 in my pocket and scars I never showed anyone. I had nothing. No job, no home, no future I could see. Someone gave me a chance when I had no right to expect it. Now I'm giving you one. And one day, you'll give someone else one too. The woman's shoulders relax slightly. Not healed, not yet. But unburdened, at least, by the weight of thinking she has to do this alone. At the same hour, Vincent sits in the diner on 8th Avenue. The same 24-hour diner where it all began. He occupies the back booth, the one where Sofia stood between his men and a terrified boy, where her fearlessness struck something inside him that thought itself permanently closed. The waitress brings him coffee. Her name is Diane. She has worked here for 7 years and remembers everything. She still comes in sometimes, Diane says. Sofia brings women from the shelter. Buys them breakfast, talks to them, helps them find their feet. Vincent nods. Yeah. She does. You two together? Diane asks, nosy but genuinely kind. We're figuring it out, Vincent says. And it is the most honest thing he has said in weeks. He looks at the security camera mounted in the corner, the same camera that captured Sofia's moment of standing up. That caught her refusing to break. He thinks about how one decision, one moment of choosing courage over safety, changed everything. How Sofia's refusal to break broke him open. How saving her taught him he was worth saving too. Harold Brennan sits in a cell in federal prison. Alone. The cell measures 8 feet by 10 feet. The walls are concrete and silence. He has 40 years here. 40 years to think about the night he underestimated a woman with nothing to lose. 40 years to understand that violence and money eventually run out, but law and consequence do not. Evelyn Blackwell occupies a similar cell in a different prison. The pearls and designer clothes are gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit. Her social standing has been obliterated. The news cycle that spread her downfall moved quickly, but it moved thoroughly. Every news outlet in the country ran the story. Every person who knew her watched her fall. That kind of public humiliation is a prison sentence of its own. The teenage boy from the diner, the one Sofia protected, now works at the shelter as part of the security team. He is learning a trade. He is building something. And every shift he works, he carries with him the memory of a woman who stood between him and danger without hesitation. Sofia's voiceover drifts across the closing images. Her voice is steady now, confident, no longer trembling like a candle in the wind. Real strength is not found in never falling. It is found in always standing back up. I fell for 8 years, locked beneath the weight of someone else's rage and cruelty. And then one night, I stood up. I called out for help. And someone saw me. And everything changed. Not because I was special. Not because I deserved it more than anyone else. But because I refused to stay down. If you are watching this and you are scared, if you are hiding, if you think you are not strong enough, you are. Stand up. Call out. Someone will see you. And if they don't, stand anyway. Because you are worth it. You always were. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something you needed to feel, drop a like and share it with someone who is struggling right now. Someone in your life who needs to hear that standing up is possible. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the stories that change us. Leave a comment and tell us what strength means to you. Tell us about a time you stood up when standing felt impossible. Every comment you leave is a light in the darkness for us. It reminds us why we keep telling these stories. It reminds us that we are not alone in this fight. No matter how hard life gets, no matter how many times you fall, remember this: after the rain, the sky clears. After the darkness, the light returns. And you, watching this right now, are stronger than you know. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you again in the next story. Goodbye.